Alright, greetings and salutations everyone. This is Roy with another episode of Let's Talk Daggerheart Beta 1.5. This is episode 15. We're going to discuss GM principles and best practices. Alright, let's go ahead and take care of that copyright. This product was created using the Darrington Press Community Gaming License, the Illuminated World Standard Resource Document, Darrington Press LLC, all rights reserved. In particular, we are talking about the Beta 1.5 rule set. The finished product is due out in spring of 2025, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. Let us get into it. I hope everyone is having a good evening. So, GMing, whether you're new to Daggerheart or whether you're new to gaming in general, if you have decided to take on the role of the GM, then that can be a bit overwhelming, especially if it's new to you. Or if it's just a new system, that can be overwhelming as well. But luckily, Daggerheart is a very easy to learn mechanics system. I feel, and if you follow the spirit of Daggerheart, abide by these principles and rules, and follow the fiction, which is what it's all about, is I think you will find yourself intuitively being able to GM much easier than you can in some other systems that have a lot more mechanics, a lot more structure, and very specific details. Something a little bit more, I guess you would call it crunchy, as we call it in the gaming community. If something has got a lot of rules and mechanics to it, that's generally considered crunchy. And then something that is, less rules and crunch is a lot more freeform. But narrative gaming is something that is becoming more popular, and I think Daggerheart does a wonderful job of bringing this to the forefront, and really is a RP inspired, character driven, player driven game system that is very collaborative. And if you take advantage of the system, I think you're going to have some of the best campaigns you've ever been a part of. And I look forward to this as well. But let's get into these principles, and if you follow these principles and do your best to follow the principles and the best practices, then you're gonna have, I believe, a successful game. The first one: begin and end with the fiction. So we were just talking about Daggerheart being a narrative-driven game, a game that is focused on the players of the game, the characters that they have created, and the collaborative effort that we're all putting forth into creating our campaign and telling our story, right? So whenever you begin and end with the fiction, this is going to let you know when to make those rolls, when is it important, and if you're uncertain what the DC should be, whether this is an advantage situation or a disadvantage situation, let the fiction inform that, and discuss with your players. This is going to be something that is going to be different for a lot of GMs and for a lot of players if they're experienced in other systems that are not collaborative, like Daggerheart is. And even the collaborative games that I've been involved in have never been collaborative to the degree that Daggerheart is, which is very exciting to me. But if you follow the fiction, if you let the fiction dictate this is a time where we do need a roll. There's something interesting that could happen here if there's a failure, right? There's a moment in the game that could really be move forward, whether it's success or failure, because either way, whether it's success or failure, the story needs to move forward when you roll, right? So you need to think about those consequences of a failure. It's not static. You don't want your game to be static and get bogged down and held up because it was a roll was a failure and there's no other way to move forward other than a success in a situation. That is, that's not good. That's not what you want. You want, even in a failure, your story still should move forward in some way, whether that's because of the failure, an increase in difficulty, an awareness that wasn't there before. Maybe it does close off some option that now there will need to be another route taken. But those decisions need to be made before the roll happens, right? That's knowing the stakes and discussing the stakes beforehand. And whenever you whenever you begin and end with the fiction, it should be fairly easy to come to a determination of what is the result of a success, or a success with fear, or a failure with hope, or a failure with fear. You don't have to have exact answers for all of those, but you should know what a success means and looks like, and you should know what a failure means and looks like. And that should definitely be based within the fiction. And the mechanics that you're using also, base them in the fiction. Let's move on to the next one. We could sit there and like underline and bold that one all day long, I'm sure. So the next principle is fill the world with life, wonder, and danger. So Daggerheart, of course, is a game of fantasy, whether that's high fantasy, gritty fantasy. It's an action adventure game. There's going to be moments of excitement and drama. But whether you're playing a lighthearted game or a game that's very gritty, it should definitely feel alive. You want that realism for your world there, right? You want it to be breathing and moving and reactionary. You can base a lot of this on what characters you've got in the group, right? On the concept that you agreed to. Use the background questions, the character connections, other details that they've provided to you to paint the world and make it more alive. Roll with the themes, the different moods that you guys have decided to emphasize. Let those contrasting questions that are obviously out there, let those kind of reflect in the wider world, right? And whenever you're throwing in hooks and places to travel to, make them wondrous, make them exotic, give them a little bit of spice, give them something special. This world is the core realm is the mortal world is supposed to be very mystical and magical place, right? We've got faint divinities running around, as well as potential forgotten gods, and all kinds of other magical and mystical, things in the world. So let that shine through in the places that you're describing. Let there be locations right out of fiction. That's what we're striving for, our own fiction, our own saga, right? So get funky with it, y'all. Get magical. Um, let it exude what the flavors that you guys have baked into your setting. Let that permeate throughout the game world, and remember to leave yourself room to add to it later. Um, Leave yourself spaces for when you get to places to allow players to insert things into the world itself, right? We've discussed that as well. Make every call. So we're gonna move on to the next one, and then you want um, you want to bake in as much, because we're making this about the players and the characters, right? So all of that should motivate what is going into the dangers of the world, the themes, the adversaries. The more you can make it about the people sitting at your table and the story that you've all agreed that you're going to tell, the more invested your players are going to be. So do what feels right for the fiction and make it a magical place that the players want to come every week, to sit down at this table and breathe life into this story that you're telling together. Um, Leave them wanting more. Leave them ready for that next chapter. Excited about what's going to happen whenever they get to the point of making decisions on their next levels. Are they gonna get to tier 3 and specialize, or are they gonna consider multi-classing? You want them excited about the game and what's happening in the game, right? You So next we want to go to the next principle. Make every roll carry weight. So what is that saying? That's talking about the importance of whenever you roll, right? We don't want to waste rolls and bog the game down with having players roll for every little thing. We want to reserve rolling for when it's going to be impactful to the game, right? This reinforces many things that are in the spirit of Daggerheart. We want the players to feel heroic, right? So that means that they get to succeed at the things that in a lot of other games you would maybe roll for to see, oh, well, can they sneak here? Can they do this? Can they pick this simple lock? And instead, in Daggerheart, you let them shine, right? You let them be the character that they're envisioning themselves to be, and not allow a bad dice roll to mess up their narrative view of their character and the fiction that you are all trying to portray of these principal characters. I generally will say protagonists and heroes and things like that, but not every group is necessarily going to want to play heroes or protagonists. There, I'm sure, will be villain games and all that out there as well, or characters that are very much living in shades of gray, and that's okay. That is something for every table to decide. You want to go really gritty with it? That is all good. There's plenty of gritty fantasy in the world, and this game can go gritty and dark, or light and whimsical, or high fantasy epic, which is the main intention of it overall. But I would say that you can cook up whatever you really want to with Daggerheart, in my opinion. But the important thing is that you want, whenever you roll, you want it to carry weight in the game. You want it to be impactful. You want it to be meaningful. You want, whenever they reach for those duality dice, for it to be something where there's a little bit of butterflies, there's a little bit of anxiety, excitement. And if you constantly are rolling for every little thing, that's not going to feel that way. Not only that, but because of the mechanics of the duality dice, the hope and the fear, you don't want to generate a bunch of hope or fear for things that are not consequential, right? So work it out in the fiction. Sometimes, and there's always going to be situations where you're like, well, I don't really necessarily want to just give it to them in this situation. There could be a little bit of, danger here in those situations, but you don't feel like it's really good and worthy enough for a roll. Offer success with a consequence. Hey, you want to be able to break in to the shop that's closed, so you can check things out and do your investigation without being noticed. It's pretty quiet. I don't think it's really that challenging here. I will allow you to succeed if you'll mark a stress for the tension and the alertness that it caused you while you're getting you and your group or yourself, whatever. You're succeeding at the thing at a cost. Negotiate. If that work, that may very well may make sense to your player as well. Remember, we're all here to serve the fiction, and that's part of the collaborative nature of the game. So negotiate and really decide whether it is time for a roll or an easy success or a negotiated success. That is just another tool in your belt, So, and this goes right into the next principle: collaborate at all times, especially in conflict. And this is something that a lot of GMs that have been doing it for a long time are not going to be used to, and are much more old school and used to the no, this is the reality you're all in, and that's it. It's kind of what I say, and that is that's one way to do it, and there's plenty of systems where that is what needs to happen, but Daggerheart's not one of those. Be willing to discuss with your players how to move forward in the fiction, how they feel this should go down, what could be the consequences. You want to have antagonism between the adversaries and the characters, but never between the players and the GM or the players and each other. And that is something that is very very important for everybody to be able to buy into the game and be able to work together collaboratively. You've got to build, and we're going to get into this. I mean, we're talking about some principles and practices and everything, but you want to be a fan of your player and their character, right? Just like how the players are supposed to be fans of their character and their fellow players' characters, you should be a fan of the whole group, right? And the players playing the characters that they've chosen. So support that. Include elements that they're interested in. Go into the themes that they're going to get excited about. You got somebody playing a guardian who's a knight of some order, and they're all about, keeping their vows, and they've got this whole story arc going where there's this one principle of theirs that they're having contentions with. Give them those situations to help them answer the questions that they're struggling with, right? Give them those opportunities, and work with them, and work with your players to make their characters shine in the ways that they want to, and answer the questions that they're hungering to answer, right? And then allow those answers to build new questions or inform the fiction in different ways, which allow you to react to those answers that have been decided by the player. Maybe they do cause new questions or resolve questions in such a way that now you can pose X, Y, and Z questions, because now they've got a stance on this, right? They've answered the question. They know where they stand here. Great. Now it's time to take that stance and let them shine with the new resolve they have. Or where does that lead? Now they stand here, so could that cause, this to come into question? Or maybe now this principle over here needs revisiting because they've decided for, that this is A, so now this principle over here should be maybe reassessed or realigned. Experiences may change. Give everyone a chance to move their personal stories forward and move the group story forward, right? And provide those opportunities for them to actually have more of an influence on those outcomes, right? Discuss it with them, and we're rolling right into and you'll notice that just describing and talking about these, it leads to the next thing. It's very organic in that way. The next principle is ask questions and incorporate the answers. Well, we've just discussed doing all of that with the collaboration, right? I don't think we need to necessarily go over that in more detail because, like I said, you want to respect everybody's contributions, fold them into the fabric of the story, right? You want to take answers and let them build new questions or resolve other things within the fiction of the world. Now that you have these answers, let them reverberate. Maybe you'll see different changes in the moods and the themes of how your NPCs are acting because this character has resolved this issue, right? So maybe now they're seeing that more clearly in the world also coming into contact with people who are more binary in that decision, right? Instead of being very gray and murky in this new world of clarity, maybe they're now seeing other things in the world through this new lens. You also want to hold on gently. This is a very important thing that with improvising the story as we go, there may be things that get established, right? Maybe they're not important, but it was said at X, Y, or Z previously that this or that was the truth, or that happened, or this happened. But if it's not imperative to the fiction, be willing to take a moment and say, hey, I know we established this minor detail back here, but let's go back and kind of gently wash over that. And maybe it was somebody making a mention of that, or it was not, it was not established that happened. Let's go back and this is much better for our fiction to allow this to happen here, and if everybody can come into agreement on that, then great, let's retrofit it. Or maybe we can come back and touch a bit of fiction that needs to just be augmented, and we can do that and get everything back onto a nice flowing stream of time where we don't have incongruencies. But you want to hold on gently to the fiction as you're creating it, and as you're establishing things. Let the spirit of what should be. Don't bind yourself down to something that, oh, that's canon because it got established in session 4 that no one from this town would ever sneeze in public, and now we've just had, a situation, that's a very silly example, but, now we've got somebody in this town that's sneezing all over the place, right? And maybe we need to adjust it, and it's very taboo to sneeze in public in this place, but it's not impossible to sneeze in public in this place, right? So hold on gently to your fiction, be willing to make adjustments, but also hold firm to the spirit of the concept and the spirit of the story that you're telling. Don't deviate from those things that are your foundations and your bedrocks, right? That's a very serious thing to do, and you definitely, before doing that, want to really discuss it. If it is something that's really important to the concept or the foundation or of someone's character or principles that matter to them, then remember to hold on to that as well. But be flexible, definitely. You want to play to find out what happens, right? You want to, you don't want to solve all of the answers to the questions before you start the game. You want to allow those to be played out and determined in the game, not decide on your own and then be like, well, this is what's going to happen because I've decided that this is the answer for that, and I'm establishing this and that. That's not what you want to do as a GM, right? You want to leave things open and be prepared for the things that could happen, right? And you'll very quickly be able to establish certain kinds of adversaries, prepare in certain ways for different things that potentially could happen, but you don't want to answer those important questions outside of the fiction. You want to let the fiction drive you to discover those answers, right? And that's very important for you to do as a GM. And it's going to be something that's going to be tricky and a learning process at times. And you will have to see in the situation and as you go through how to adjust and know when it's time to throw out plans and when it's time to adjust plans to work with what's at the table. You want to follow your characters, right? You want to follow your players. And so be open-minded whenever it comes to creative resolutions and things. You're going to be surprised at what people will try, what they will come up with as good ideas. The more you can embrace those decisions and let them influence the game and the fiction, the better off you're going to be. Does that mean you always have to go like, oh, of course the players are going to always have the right answer because we're going to follow what they want to do? That's not what I'm saying here, and that would quickly, I'm sure, become boring for players as well. And if they realize and feel like that's what's going to happen, then you will start getting more ridiculous responses, answers that are testing you to see where you will draw the line and what you will let people get away with, and that's something that will be determined also on who you've got playing your game, their personalities, whether they are serving the fiction or whether they're testing the boundaries of the game. These are all things that you have to consider and take into account as well. But definitely let the answers come through the play, right? So those are your GM principles. Now we're going to look at the GM best practices. So cultivate a curious table. So what does that mean? That means you want to give them interesting little things. You want to throw crumbs and bits out there. You want to get them to be curious about the hints and things that you leave for them, right? Maybe there's an opportunity to, catch a bit of a conversation from some people passing by, right? And that could be a bit of a, you know, curiosity, right? Maybe there's something odd about something that they do on a day-to-day basis, and something strange occurs this morning, or the next time they perform their evening tide ritual, maybe something is strangely amiss. Maybe you can hint at some foreshadowing of some dark event that's on the horizon that they're not aware of yet. Throw out crumbs and hooks aplenty, and let your players determine what to pick up and follow. Right now, you don't want to overwhelm them, or constantly be hitting them with things that gets them to the point of frustration if they're trying to follow an arc or a thread in the story, and you continuously are throwing 3 or 4 hooks at them every time they're trying to progress on their little story that leads off to different tangents. Know when to use that, as with all things. You want to make it a living and breathing world. Not everything is about what's going on right here in front of your face, but you also want to allow players to have a certain amount of focus on their objectives and the things that are going on, right? Allow them and allow your players to also insert into the world little bits and pieces throughout the game. And as you're describing something, you might ask them, what do you think about this, as as a former guard of the city? What do you think about the situation here, the way the common folk are being treated with these murders happening in this district, and allow that to kind of inform, a bit of the fiction. Maybe give them, that same example. That this is a rougher part of town. What is the main source of the commoners' fear and crime? Fear of crime in this area. What's the main source of that? Who are they nervous about? Do and allow your player to step in and describe a bit of something. Maybe there's a lot of muggings in this area, and they decide that's why this is kind of a quieter, more rough part of town, because traditionally there's been a lot of muggings. So you can play that up, or maybe there's a lot of gambling dens or whatever. Allow your players to add to the world on a regular basis, and if they're collaborating on informing the fiction as well, then they're going to be paying more attention to the details that you give them, right? You also want to gain your players' trust, right? And that's going to be very important, because there's going to be times where you're going to need to trust your players, and the players are definitely going to need to trust that you, as the GM, are acting in good faith. Because there's going to be moments where they're not going to know ahead of time, right, of something happening. But if you have their trust, whenever you step in and say, just as you were about to do this thing, the adversaries that were lying in wait to see what was going to happen now pounce, right? That normally is not something that you're going to do on a regular basis, because the person initiating whatever action should be the person that gets to initiate the action, right? So whenever you have situations like that where maybe the adversaries have been lying in wait for the heroes to step into the market and actually present their evidence or whatever it is, the MacGuffin, to their employer, that's the moment when they're going to pounce, right? If you just have a conversation with them and then move on, they're going to continue to skulk along and follow, But once they know that it is in the player's possession, that's when they make their move. So if you've got the player's trust, whenever you announce this to happen, they're going to buy into it. They're going to know that is what's up. If you constantly are doing things like this to them all the time, or surprising them with things that get in the way of their best laid plans, and it doesn't feel like it's a fair situation or going according to the motives that you guys have established, then you're not going to have that trust. You're going to lose that trust. So whenever you decide something, you need to make sure that that's what happens, right? Whenever someone rolls a success with fear, you want to make sure that they still get to succeed at the thing that they were doing. And whatever consequences come of that because of the fear should not negate the success they just had. Or trump it by, making it come in with something immediately to derail whatever they just accomplished, right? That's not what you want to do on a success. So make sure that you're, doing things for the right reasons, that you are acting in good faith, serving the fiction. When you're introducing your challenges and your consequences, you're doing what's best for the game, right? You're making the interesting decisions. You're using the trust that you have with your party, with your players, like a commodity, right? And you don't want to waste that commodity and get them not trusting you because you made poor decisions whenever you had that trust. So make sure that you follow through on what you're gonna do. Let your players' hunches and intuitions carry them whenever you can, even if it's not in the absolute correct direction. Maybe it can be a roundabout way to get there, or let them, validate the choices that they make and the way that they're going about things, right? You don't want to be seen as adversarial or punishing them for their creativity. And this is something that we've discussed earlier, a best principle: treat the characters as competent. So, like I was saying before, whenever a failure happens, you want to put that at the hands of, it's not that they just sucked or were bad at something, they totally whiffed horribly. No, let the adversary block at the last moment or dodge out of the way. Let the slipperiness of the surface they're trying to climb, or maybe a loose rock or something pulls free, and that's why they fail. Not that they clumsily couldn't get their foot in that next spot. Let it be environmental. Let the world or the adversaries take the heat for the failures, right? Let your characters shine as the heroes that they're trying to portray, right? Whatever that means for them and for that character. So that is that's a key thing that you can do that will make a big difference to players and their characters. Don't be afraid to cut to the action, right? Whenever you find yourself bogging down or people getting tired of whatever's happening, discuss maybe a montage. Discuss, okay, let's figure out what we're gonna do for this role on this research here. How y'all go about, let's figure out what the stakes are. We'll make the roll and then we'll do the montage, right? Because we need to know what we're looking at, whether it's success, failure, or what kind of success, what kind of failure, before we go into describing all of the course of the montage, right? So figure out the stakes, make the roll, then collaborate or allow your player to do a montage of what did that look like, what did getting these answers, what did that look like today, who did what, how did y'all go about it, and that's a good way to sum up a scene if you're not interested in playing out the moment by moment day of whatever's going on. You will have times when you'll want to go moment by moment and have those individual conversations, and you'll have times where montages will work beautifully, right? Downtime, right? So that's a good time for players to have conversations with each other. This is something that, depending on the game, can or might not happen as often between players. But with Daggerheart, those conversations can do so much to do the world building, to build the story, to answer questions, to pose new questions. So always try and have those moments for your players to be able to have those scenes where they start having conversations. And you want to pay attention as the GM to what's going on, and that way you can add in details later down the road. Sometimes some of my favorite moments have been paying attention to players talking while at camp, or discussing little bits and pieces of backgrounds, and just catching something, and without anyone even noticing, just jotting something down. And then 2 or 3 sessions later, or maybe even further than that, if it was details about a particular town or something from somebody's background, you can work those little things in, and you'll have players that will notice and remember, oh my gosh, you took that from that conversation we were talking about, and this is now a dish that we're eating here at this tavern, and it's not quite the same as my favorite dish back at home, but it's got its own little thing, but it's reminiscent. Add those little things. Use those for small things and big things, but don't be afraid to, whenever it does bog down, to cut away to some action. Don't be afraid to revisit situations if it's something that does need to be revisited, and it's just kind of dragging. And you can always say to, hey, player A and B, let's go ahead and kind of fade to black on this conversation. You guys can come back to it later. Maybe give a chance to think about it, or maybe we'll come up with an answer in play, and then we can revisit the resolution of this conversation, later on, or whatever the situation is. Whether it's a conversation, a scenario between a player and an NPC, whatever that is that's dragging. You can always come back to it later and say, let's pick up in this scene over here and go move this way, right? Which brings us to the next practice. Keep the story moving forward. So this is not just narratively, but this is what we were talking about with whether the role is a success or a failure. Either way, the world moves forward, right? It responds in some way. The story should be moving forward, even if it's through failing. You might not get what you want if the roll goes bad, but something should happen. Maybe an escalation or new information or a change in some other situation should occur, right? You also want to help the players use the game, right? Don't let people be intimidated by, I don't know if this is going to work, or I don't know the rules for this or that, or I don't feel comfortable. You're there to help them in those situations, right? You're also there to, if there's something that the players may not be aware of, but their characters would surely know. Remember, these characters are living and breathing in this realm that you've created, that the players only get to visit, every game session, maybe read up on it in between or discuss here and there with you, but they are not going to have the same understanding of this world as the people who are living in it, the characters that they've created. So sometimes you as the GM may need to advise the players of something that they're overlooking, but surely their characters wouldn't, right? Also, you want to use the mechanics, your toolkit, to serve the fiction, not be an obstacle that the players have to work around to try and do what they want to do. You should ask the players what they want to do, and then figure out how to mechanically resolve that, if that is what needs to happen. If it is something that is mechanical, or maybe it's something that they're just uncertain on how to do something, or how they feel about something rules wise. Don't be afraid to discuss it with your players, right? And help them out whenever they need it. And if someone, if you have a question about something, or someone else has a question about something, don't be afraid to address it at the table, because player A might have asked a question, but player B and C are also so happy that they did because they were too embarrassed to ask the same thing, right? So be there and gain that trust, and you will not have an issue with your players discussing these things with you. And that comes to the next one: create a meta conversation. What does that mean, a meta conversation? That means that players should feel comfortable talking in character, talking as players at the table, right? Enjoying a game with their friends or their fellow participants if they're not buddies and they don't know each other. And then also on the collaborative level of the story, there should also be, everybody should feel comfortable to be able to take and step into any of those tiers of discussion at any time and say, hey, can I mention something over here? I know we're deep in this really dramatic character moment here, but meta-wise, as a collaborator, what are we trying to, what are we going for here? I kind of was thinking I could say this, but I don't want to step on any toes. If y'all are feeling like it's more of a, X, Y, or Z situation. So let people be comfortable on all of those levels of interaction, right? If you make it so that you're talking to people on the player level, on the just as a player at the game, checking in, making sure that you're okay, having a good time, things like that, enjoying the moments as they're happening, right? Just being a fan of what's going on at the table. You've got the collaborative kind of tier of wanting to make sure that you're serving the fiction, you're doing the things for the right reasons, and helping promote someone else's arc, or checking in to make sure that you are not messing up someone else's arc or how they view X, Y, or Z situation. And then, of course, at the character level as well. And that is, whenever you establish it, it's going to be easier and easier for your players to jump into those different tiers of conversation and be comfortable doing so. The more comfortable everybody is doing so, the more the game is going to flow in the direction that you all want it to, and the fiction will be, I think, deeper and richer for it. So you want to ground the world in motive, right? So this is not a murder hobo game per se. We want everybody to have motivations. We want the world to have motivations. We want the world to make sense, right? Most animals are not going to fight to the death in every situation, right? Now, there may be some animals that will fight to the death no matter what. There would be plenty of animals that would fight to the death in certain situations, but there's also going to be plenty of animals that, they get a certain amount of hurt, they're going to want to get away. Things do not want to die, right? That's not a natural state of being for most living things. Most living things are not going to, do or die, 100%. There's gonna come that moment when it's like, oh, it's time to go, and everybody's got if you ground your people and your intelligent creatures in motive as well, then you can use that to guide what happens in the game. If you've got a corrupt guard that works this gate, then make it so, let that inform how he behaves. Maybe you got an honest merchant, right? That is very principled. Let that guide his entire actions. Take what you've got and let those motives breathe life into your world, right? Things that happen without good reason or don't make sense to the fiction that you've created are not gonna feel like they are real situations. It's gonna take and pull people out of your fiction, right? The more unrealistic it feels, the more it doesn't make sense with motives, then the less it's going to be, the harder it's going to be for people to become invested in the fiction if you're constantly pulling them out with things that don't make sense because the motives don't make sense. So you want to bring the game mechanics to life as well, right? So we've already discussed how the game mechanics serve the fiction, right? So you've got your hope and your fear rolls. Hope and fear should be inspiring the ups and downs of a scene, right? And and you should let that inform the fiction as well. Whenever you're sitting on a pool of fear that's maxed out, you should be kind of having maybe a little bit more of an oppressive nature to the overarching gloom and doom and the potential for just badness happening, right? As you start to spin that, maybe it's a more intense and feels more intense because everybody knows, you know, meta wise, you've got this pool of fear sitting here ready to unload. You're coming to this point where a big conflict is headed your way. Everybody is aware of that. Play it up, let it build, let the fiction build, let the dread build, and then boom, let it tumble out in magnificent ways, right? Let the mechanics serve the fiction in the way the story is told. Just like with the narrative and everything else, you can bring in countdown timers, right? To bring in and embody situations that you want to cause, to let people know there's more badness coming, or maybe reinforcements arrive, at the bottom of this counter. Whenever this countdowns, you just gotta hold out this long. The reinforcements will arrive. Your ritual will complete. Whatever the situation is, let the mechanics serve purpose in your fiction, right? And whenever you can do that, it will make things more exciting. The next best practice is to reframe rather than reject, right? So maybe someone gives you something that's totally out of whack with what has been established in the game, or is just generally something that doesn't make sense plausibly, right? Logically, this would not be something that makes sense. It's not plausible for this to happen. Instead of just rejecting it, how can we take what they're wanting to do and maybe reframe it? Maybe this doesn't work quite like this, but what we could do is X, Y, or Z. Try and if nothing else, use what is doable from that suggestion, right? Maybe something is more workable than some other part of it. Do what you can to not just reject, right? Because no one feels good, especially in a game where it's collaborative, when everybody's putting forth their stuff and then you put forth your idea, or you come up with something and it just gets totally no, that's not, we're not going to do that one. That doesn't make sense, or let's not decide that. Instead, take what they've done and, okay, well, I see why you're suggesting that, but because of this, that doesn't really make logical sense to do that. But what we could do is, what if there was rumors of this beginning to, or maybe there's a group that wants to start working on making these things happen, or we can take and establish that X instead of Z, or it's a little bit tricky without having exact scenarios per se. Let's see what we've got here. You might be able to fly up to the platform using the telekinesis spell in your grimoire, but you might not be able to, but there are plenty of large rocks here you could move around if you wanted to. So like, for example, someone in this example is wanting to use their telekinesis spell to fly up to a platform. Well, that doesn't seem within the realm of the telekinesis spell. they could maybe stack these rocks to move them around in such a way that they could climb up, or do something else with their telekinesis spell, other than fly, to get the same goal that they're wanting, but something that makes more sense within the fiction, and the thing that they're trying to use. We've already discussed working in moments and montages. There will be those times where you'll want to zero in on something very specific, and capture that beat, that moment, that can be impactful for the overall game. Or maybe it, instead of going moment to moment throughout the whole afternoon, trying to find out what you can about the notorious lord that is potentially, you suspect, spreading bad rumors in court and working with the underworld of the town, potentially attempting to assassinate the princess. Instead of playing through all of that all day, do the montage, make the rolls, figure out what the stakes are, make the roll, and then establish, after the roll is made, how that plays out in the game. Do the montage of what those steps are, whether success or failure comes of it. And that can be a nice way to tie up some scenes, right? Things you want to avoid, right? So you don't want to undermine the heroes. This is what we were talking about before with, having your heroes trip or swing, horribly, or, the reason why they're trying to bash down the door, and they rolled a 3 and it was a horrible failure, right? Well, instead of it being that, they just are total wimps, or just, hurt themselves incompetently, and now their arm is all messed up, right? Maybe the door that they thought was wooden actually is magically reinforced, right? Or maybe it was very stout. The lock is up, once they tried to bash it, the lock was much more stout than what they thought it was. Maybe the door is barred. You can establish other things to explain a failure other than undermining the heroes themselves. You don't always want to tell the players what they're going to roll, right? Sometimes you want to discuss the trait options with your players. Let there be a back and forth, a negotiation. Sometimes let them, right? They're coming up to you with what they're trying to do, what they want to do. Have them suggest, okay, so what were you thinking for this role? If it's something that works, let it happen. Let them roll what they were thinking. If it's something that obviously doesn't make sense and they're really stretching it and trying to, just roll something that's going to be very beneficial for them, but it doesn't make sense narratively, maybe either work with them to reframe the narrative to allow them to do something with what they're wanting to do dice-wise, or reframe the trait, negotiate with them. Well, I don't think strength is the correct trait to use in this situation, but I will allow you to, if you want to spend the hope on your experience of being a hardened warrior, I do think that could apply, even though it's not a strength roll like we're thinking, like you were hoping for. I do think your hardened warrior experience would apply, right? So be willing to negotiate, work with them, whether that be working with them narratively to make what they're wanting to do make more sense within the fiction, or negotiate with them on the trait that they're rolling to do what they're wanting to do narratively in the fiction. You don't want to let scenes drag. If you're losing everybody, and there's one person just kind of holding things up, or maybe you have gone on a little too long and you look out and your players' eyes are all kind of glazed over and they're not very focused, it's time to wrap up that scene, right? You don't want to let things drag out, and whether that is narratively through just waiting for people to finish shopping, or whether that's a combat that is just got way too many minions left, or insignificant things that you're just basically having your players beat down for the sake of they're not going to let them go, obviously. But, the dangerous enemies have been dealt with. There's, 6 more minions left. Wrap it up in a roll or two. Allow them to, if it's not significant and they're going to win, let them narratively describe. Okay, y'all go ahead and tell me how you finish off these last handful of bandits. Whatever needs to happen. You just don't want to drag and and just have people suffering through a scene that no one is interested in anymore. You also want to avoid those bottleneck singular solutions, right? Those things, even if you're going to set up a puzzle or a riddle, something like that, you should always have room for creative solutions, right? If you establish that this, you got to get the key, and if you don't have the key, there's no unlocking the door, and that's it. That's a roadblock. And now they don't have the key. They're not going to get the key. The key has been thrown into the sea with no chance, or destroyed. It's in the acid. What has happened? Who knows? But whenever you make a singular solution, you're putting yourself and your party at a roadblock, right? And if the roadblock is not resolved, there's no moving the story forward. That is no good. You do not want to get yourself in those situations. Always leave yourself room for other solutions. Over planning. Whenever you over plan, you have a habit of making things. You've prepared so much and you've created so much that now you're less likely to have creative solutions that go outside of the box that you have prepared for, right? You spent all this time doing X, Y, and Z, planning all this stuff out. Now they're got another solution which narratively is really cool and makes sense, but now it's going to circumvent everything that you've done, or you can't allow that to happen because you planned this thing now, and in the planning of it you made this decision and that decision, and they will prevent the thing that the players just creatively came up with from succeeding. Well, you're going back and going the wrong way. You're not allowing the fiction to answer the questions, right? You've overplanned and answered the questions outside of the fiction. And like I said, this will be a thing that you will learn how much to prepare, how much not to prepare, and it's going to be an art. It's going to be something that you will get more comfortable with the more you do it. So just be forewarned about over preparing in Daggerheart. You want to leave room. You want to hold on gently. Remember, let the fiction build and inform the narrative. The questions should be answered in game. And you don't want to just sit on you don't want to let your fear pool get up to 7 and then just let it sit there at 7, right? Just like heroes, your players should not be, letting their hope sit at a full pool. You should be spending it up here and there as you're going. Even if it's not action scenes or things like that, there's other things that you can do with your fear to promote or progress the story, right? So you should use it. Let it be informing the fiction as well. Because if you've got a pool and you're just sitting on it, you're wasting opportunities to let that breathe into the narrative and the fiction as well, right? Don't sit on the full storm cloud all day, every day. Let it rumble, let it air out. You need those ebbs and flows, those ups and downs, right? So don't be afraid to spend some of that fear. And that really kind of is the gist of the principles and the best practices, things you want to avoid. I hope this kind of lets you know a little bit more about where I stand as a GM. If you're interested in playing in one of my games, I highly encourage you to hop on over to Start Playing. I've got 4 Daggerheart sagas, campaigns set up, ready to go. I'm charging $25 a session. Less than I pay for my average Grubhub meal if I grab some fast food takeout. But I would love to be able to do this for my job. If I'm not successful with this, I'll quickly be having to make some decisions to avoid getting booted out of my home, and don't want that to happen either. But I highly encourage you to come and give me a shot and play some Daggerheart. I'm super excited to do so. I think this is going to be a great game. It will be a unique campaign. Every campaign is going to be a unique campaign in ways that are very different from a lot of other systems. So feel free to ask me questions here. From here, we'll be moving forward with more Let's Talk Daggerheart content. I also, if there's GMs out there that want to ask me questions, whether it be Daggerheart specific or GMing, regardless of system, I'm happy to give my advice. I've played a ton of different systems, every genre you can imagine. I might not know all the answers to systematic questions depending on the system you're asking about, but I can give you some good GMing tips regardless of what system you're talking about. So we will be probably starting a campaign corner kind of series to talk to GMs about whatever. I may pull some questions from some online groups that I'm part of to get those first couple episodes out with some discussions, some things to talk about. And then once we do get the sagas rolling, which once 2 people sign up, that will trigger the session 0 to schedule, and we will hold the session 0 whether there's 2 people at the table or 6 people at the table. It can be anywhere in between that. But once I've got 2 people, we will start those games. I would love to have more people at the session 0 because it will allow them to influence the story more and get in on the campaign themes and the core decisions that we make as a group will be made by the people there at that session 0, and joining afterwards will be possible, but it will come with some caveats of we've already got the campaign established, so now you need to fall into these kinds of categories. So if you really want to have an influence on the campaign you're playing, the best way to do it is to be involved in that session 0. So take a look if you're interested. Start playing. Rollinwolf, aka John, is what I GM under, and I've got games set for Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and Tuesdays right now. So take a look and sign up. We'd love to have you play. You can also donate directly to the channel through the PayPal donation, both on Twitch and on YouTube. Appreciate any donations as well. If you've enjoyed the series and enjoyed the video, please do the thing, hit the likes, the follows, the subscriptions. This is Rollinwolf coming at you, and saying good evening at the moment, and wishing you the best. Be kind to each other out there. Hope you have a good day. Spread a little light and love to somebody if you can. We all need it. So Rollinwolf signing off. We'll catch you next time.